Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. Yesterday's satellite imagery showed low pressure here south of the Alaska Peninsula. Some of that moisture sliding on up to the northwest, and a pretty good low pressure area developing there south of Cape Sarachev along the south of the Alaska Peninsula there, and a persistent flow of southeasterly winds carrying moisture northward, and pretty gusty conditions yesterday as well as today, but not quite as windy as today there across Bristol Bay and the peninsula. And most of the rainfall from Kodiak Island on out to the west, about a little under half an inch falling yesterday at Kodiak, and about the same over at Dutch Harbor, and then the moisture flowing northward through the Bering Strait there. High pressure aloft, cool, dry, and light wind conditions here in the interior on down the southeast coast, and that led to some patchy fog to develop mostly this morning over the some areas of the southeast coast. There were fog advisories out, and I think continue to be out for some localized areas there over the north and northwest part of the southeast coast due to the fog. Also had fog up along the Arctic coast. A couple areas socked in, both Barrow and Dead Horse. Quarter mile in ice fog up there on the visibilities. And Barter Island, though, clear skies and 10-mile visibility. And then that offshore flow, easterly winds, made the fog conditions a little more patchy and isolated. So it's a little better out here on the west side. See a very weak front dragging across the area there, kind of rotating around the big upper level high that's over northwest Canada and eastern Alaska. Still have a frontal boundary here right along Kodiak Island, right up into the southwest. Again, heaviest rain. About 4/10 of an inch fell both at Dutch Harbor again and Kodiak, give or take a few hundredths either way there. And that kind of wraps back down. Rain fell in the Pribilofs today, light rain, and then some moisture, mostly St. Lawrence Island back to the west, and just some flurries to maybe some isolated snow showers along the Alaska Range there. But this area kind of trails out into the Gulf of Alaska, and there's an area of lower clouds out here, and some of that could result in some rain, light rain or drizzle as it comes on shore to the Kenai Peninsula. Otherwise looking at mostly clear skies off to the east, and a front working in to the western Aleutians, but that mostly sliding southeastward. As we'll roll this along, you can see it's really falling apart and not making much headway. Actually, the two cloud bands there kind of colliding just east of Kiska Island. And on the chart earlier today, there's that trough through the interior, just some variable mid and high level clouds with that isolated snow showers or flurries, nothing significant at all, but it does extend down here off the Kenai Peninsula, and that's where there are some clouds and some light precipitation. A little bit heavier, as I mentioned, here along the main front from Kodiak Island on up along the southwest coast and to the west and northwest, with rain and snow showing up all the way to St. Lawrence Island, not so much into the Seward Peninsula. Clear skies, except for the areas of fog here over the southeast coast, into the interior valleys, east side pretty clear, and temperatures ranging from about 2 degrees or somewhere around there, was less than 10 anyway, over in Northway, to 52, which was the state's high in Homer, due to those southeast winds and a little downward mixing. Pretty big contrast between that 52 and the temperatures just to the north. For tonight, mostly clear and light wind conditions there for the southeast coast. No advisories or warnings out for the marine areas. Fair skies. There'll be some variable high stuff, especially over the western interior, but nothing too significant or that will produce any precipitation. Look for the patchy fog along the Arctic coast, otherwise dry, as that remnants of that front kind of lifts back up to the north there, and then the other part pulls off to the east. We still have something of a very weak frontal boundary, just some isolated areas of moisture here from the Kuskokwim Mountains out to the west. A little more extensive, but nothing too heavy at all over Bristol Bay, and that in the form of rain or snow. And Kodiak Island, winds coming back up as the gradient tightens, mostly due to this system down to the south and the high up over northwest Canada. So look for small craft advisories, gale force winds to be on the increase again, and to a lesser extent over Bristol Bay. And a couple of frontal boundaries out here to the west and southwest. This is mostly a showery condition today anyway, with a thunderstorm reported near Cape Sarachev or observed around that area, and showers back across the eastern Aleutians. That may develop into more of a rain condition, but it'll be periods of rain, nothing terribly steady, but the winds on the increase, and that moisture still hanging out in the western Aleutians. For the forecast tomorrow, rain, periods of, again, for Kodiak, and that looks good for the forecast for Sunday as well. Several systems will be coming northwestward in that southeast wind flow, and with the high pressure here over the interior, lower pressure down to the south, that's going to keep the windy area right here from the southern Kenai Peninsula. In fact, gale force winds forecast to spread into the Barren Islands and up to Kamishak Bay tomorrow, as well as all of Kodiak Island, and staying windy here along the southwest coast with some areas of light precipitation of either rain or rain and snow mixed, mostly along the coastal areas, and that will be light, and that'll continue to wrap back into the Pribilof Island areas, especially around St. Paul, and then just some scattered areas of moisture on up to the north with some variable cloudiness, as this system still sits south of the Fox Islands there. Periods of light rain and fog possible, but the wind's not all that bad for tomorrow. And back to the northwest, that low still out in the far western Bering Sea. Well, the next system down there looks like tomorrow night, and then on Sunday will come northward as the upper level high begins to recede back to the southeast and weaken. That's going to allow this system to push more moisture a little farther to the east to the North Gulf Coast early Sunday, and then eventually on into the southeast coast during the afternoon hours, with also a pickup in the winds. Actually tomorrow forecasting the winds to come up in small craft advisories just about all areas for the Panhandle, and then looks like even some gale force winds with this system from the North Gulf Coast all the way back into Kodiak Island, but that will mostly be overnight tomorrow night with the gale force winds, and then as that lifts northward and low center comes over the island, those winds will swing around to the south-southwest and come down considerably, probably down to 10 to 15 miles an hour, but quite windy conditions, big surge of moisture, and good shot of rain, especially into the western Prince William Sound areas and down the south side of the Kenai Peninsula. Still a lot of leftover moisture here over the southwest coast for periods of rain, and gusty winds coming down a little bit from what they have been, and actually the gradient shifting off to the northwest there, but still that south to north flow is going to keep it wet along the Alaska Peninsula and locally over the Bering Sea. And this system here, or there's one now more to the south of the central Aleutians instead of the eastern Aleutians, so you're kind of in a break here on Sunday, and then a lot of bands of moisture, but nothing too heavy in the way of wind or rain expected out there. And even though the high pressure is sliding off to the southeast, there's still quite an upper level ridge persisting here up into the eastern and northern interior. So conditions are going to stay about the same, dry and cool, and just some variable high clouds, mostly down toward the Tanana Valley, coming off the Alaska range there, but staying pretty good, and just watch for the increase in the rain there for the southeast coast. For temperatures today down that way, lower 30s to lower 40s, 41 at Ketchikan, and 36 up at Skagway, 38 over in Cordova. Homer at 4 p.m. at 51, but they were up to 52 an hour earlier. 31 in Anchorage with 23 Talkeetna, 10 degrees there at Gulkana. I mentioned around 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees the reading at Northway, 23 at Delta, back down to 19 at Fairbanks. And 26 though at Tanana, 1 degree above zero at Fort Yukon, 19 Bettles, 25 at Anaktuvik, kind of indicating the warmer air aloft there with a higher elevation, 32 at Ambler. And up along the Arctic coast, kind of a range anywhere from 14 at Dead Horse, 27 at Barrow, and mostly in the upper 20s on the west side. 28 Shishmaref, but above freezing, mid-30s at Nome, and mid to upper 30s there along the Yukon Delta coast. Inland quite a range depending on your elevation and whether you had the wind or not. Sparravon 40, McGrath 23, 37 at Bethel, and that kind of a common temperature there, as well as at St. Mary's. And Macoriac lower to mid-40s over Bristol Bay, actually up close to 50 in some areas, and 40s out and then cooling back down over the western Aleutians. Lows tonight anywhere from 10 below to 10 above here over the eastern interior from the Copper River Basin up across the Yukon Flats, and upper teens for the eastern Arctic coast to near 30 out toward Cape Lisburne. Otherwise in the 20s, 20 to 25 for the Selawik Valley and Kotzebue Sound, upper 20s the Seward Peninsula. Again, under mild southerly wind flow, temperatures staying above freezing for St. Lawrence Island and areas of the Yukon Delta coast. Definitely for Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and the Alaska Peninsula staying quite mild. Upper 20s or lower 20s to lower 30s there for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, still in the on the cool side here, but not all that cold. 0 to 5 above there for the Yukon Valley. Mid to upper 20s along the Arctic coast, and again with that continued south and southeast wind flow, staying very mild, up near 50 there over Bristol Bay. Cooling back into the upper 30s as you get up toward the Bering Strait. No change for the Pribilofs or the Aleutians. And for flying weather, as you can see, VFR, there'll probably be some areas of patchy marginal to IFR due to the fog along the Arctic coast, but generally looking really good here through the interior right down to the Gulf of Alaska. And southeast coast, again, those areas of marginal to IFR conditions, kind of patchy and isolated due to the low clouds and fog. And the more extensive area, though, will be south of Kodiak Island, right up into the Alaska Peninsula on the Bering Sea side, with some marginal VFR, again, with that moisture just to the south showing up along the Kenai Peninsula along the coast, and then just hit and miss here along the southwest coast, more likely, though, over the southeast Bering. And eastern Aleutians could see some IFR with that system to the south, but not too bad until you get farther out to the west. Passes. All passes are VFR tomorrow. Anaktuvik, both entrances, Adigan, Brooks Range, looking good. And for the Alaska Range, all the way around, VFR. Windy, Isabel, Sealing's visibility is unlimited in some of these areas. And for Tanita, good VFR. Portage, open as well. For Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, again, high pressure aloft, resulting in 10,000 foot freezing levels, 8 to 10,000 feet here over the eastern interior, but Sunday that's going to start slipping off to the southeast or as early as tomorrow afternoon, and again that's going to allow those systems to come up from the south. Cooler air mass out here. This overall pattern really isn't going to change that much into most of next week. Upper level low pressure will continue out over the Bering Sea. Upper level high pressure, at least in the form of a ridge, will stay put over the along 140 west southeast coastal areas. So the flow will go from southeast to south, as we'll see here. I'm getting ahead of myself, but icing threats, possible moderate rime icing, southern Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, and areas of back to the northwest, really hit and miss out to the west, none over the interior or the southeast coast. Now looking at the upper level wind flow chart, here's that huge ridge of high pressure with the main center right around in this area, north to south winds. That's where the cold air is back here and also over in Russia, with these systems driving eastward. And again, this will kind of slip back to the southeast and allow these to come up a little farther to the east and a little more potent as they hit the North Gulf Coast Sunday night, Monday, and into Wednesday. And 9,000 feet, very strong flow, east-southeast, 40 to 55 knots here, Kodiak Island, diminishing as you go up the coastline, and 3,000 feet, about the same pattern, with the wind speeds not all that much different there from 40 knots there, supporting those gale force winds. Over the Barren Islands, the 55 knots down around Sitkinak, 20 to 35 knots over the eastern Bering Sea. Lighter winds for the Panhandle, light and variable over the interior. And of course, turbulence where the strongest winds are, mechanical stuff, here the Aleutian Range at the Kilbrook Mountains, and of course across Kodiak Island, and moderate chop definitely possible for the eastern Aleutians, areas of light to isolated moderate where those gusty winds extend up towards St. Lawrence Island. And after the break, hangar flying, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. Last Monday we had Donnie Hatch on, and we're going to have him back on tonight. Donnie is the distribution manager for DeLorme, and they handle a product called InReach. And as many of you hopefully have seen on this program before, I've talked about this breadcrumb technology, and they offer a product I think is a great product for us aviators up here. And essentially what happens is you turn this thing on when you go fly, and you leave markers on a map as you fly along. People can track your position. People can, if you don't get to where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, they can go online and see where the track was. It's great technology, and it's a game changer. So Donnie, it's nice to have you back.
Thank you.
And we ran out of time last time. I want to talk about a couple of other features with the InReach. And one of them is talking flight plans. We've worked out something, I think it's just here in Alaska, but maybe in the lower 48, I don't know. But I know it's up here with the Flight Service Station up here. Talk a little bit about the ESRS.
Sure. The ESRS program was certainly pioneered here in Alaska, and on the heels of that program's success, this summer Lockheed Martin Flight Services in the lower 48 adopted their own safety initiative, very modeled after the ESRS program, to enhance aviation safety for all general aviation flights throughout the lower 48. The FAA tested our InReach devices all throughout the state of Alaska. They carried out rigorous testing of our devices, both in tracking or flight following mode, two-way texting mode, and SOS mode, to ensure that the device worked at any location and at any altitude, and put their stamp of approval on the InReach device, incorporated the InReach models into the ESRS program this spring. The ESRS program, Enhanced Special Reporting Service, was really designed to improve upon traditional search and rescue methods utilizing satellite technology. Because as we all know, there's a lot of areas at certain altitudes in Alaska where radar, quite frankly, doesn't work. And so pilots can find themselves in a lot of places throughout the state of Alaska where traditional flight following or tracking methods just simply don't work. Owing to the InReach device's true global coverage at any altitude, we have an ability to broadcast the flight path of any aircraft regardless of where it flies. And so with that, it allows the pilot today, when filing their master flight plan, to register essentially the serial number of their DeLorme InReach device, which would then allow the flight service centers to pull up the location of the flight in the event that the pilot doesn't close their flight plan on time, or also allows the FAA in exchange to actually send emergency alerts or notifications to the InReach device. So this two-way technology not only broadcasts the flight path live on the internet for the FAA to view only in the instance of an SOS, only when SOS is pressed, but in reverse mode, it also allows the FAA to send emergency alerts to the pilot, which could include TFRs, SIGMETs, NOTAMs, and other mission-critical information relative to the pilot's flight plan.
But if, as I understand it, if I filed a flight plan and I reach the ETA and have not closed it, but I filed it either and I've got a master flight plan on file, the FAA in the flight service station can go in there and actually query my device to see where I'm at. And compared to traditional search and rescue, I mean, that process was drawn out, comm check, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now we shortcut right to the point and see where this aircraft is.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, we're very hopeful that sometime down the road, pilots in Alaska will be able to open and close their flight plans utilizing the two-way text messaging on their inReach device.
Talk real quickly, because we're going to run out of time.
Sure.
One of the features I was not aware of is this Oceans, OCENS.com. Explain that real quick.
Yeah, so Oceans, OCENS.com or .net is a company based in Seattle, Washington that specializes in providing weather and atmospheric related information to remote users, either at sea or in the air. And so recognizing the capabilities of the inReach device, we've partnered with that company whereby pilots throughout the state could go to most any pilot shop here in the state of Alaska and purchase a low-cost subscription, under $100 a year.
And you can't do that online?
You'll buy the license through the pilot shop here in Alaska, and then activate that service online.
And real quick, because we're running out of time.
Sure.
We're out of time. What does it provide?
It provides precipitation, dew point,
for a destination where you're going?
For either the destination that you are at or the ICAO, that is the destination airport.
So can they go on this website and find out more about it?
Absolutely, yes.
Donnie, I've got to cut you off. We've run out of time. Thanks for being on
Thank
the program
you.
both times. It's great. Appreciate your product, and hopefully more of our aviators out there will adopt this breadcrumb technology. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. But I want to emphasize, tomorrow, November 15th, 8 o'clock registration, Lusac Library here in Anchorage. We're going to have the Fall Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation Fall Safety Seminar. It's really going to be a good program. Hope to see you there. In the meantime, fly safe.
Welcome back. Sea ice graphic here that Kimberley Hoeppner put together for me, showing here along the coast, this thin and young, extending up toward Norton Sound there, but real slow going here, filling in due to those, well, a couple of reasons. The higher than normal sea surface temperatures it started out with, and then the south to north winds that have become really persistent. But as you can see, iced up all along the Arctic coast here, pretty much mostly to the east. Some of the marine areas still open though. And for the coasts, light variable winds tonight through tomorrow. So again, that's going to lead to areas of fog, some of it on the dense side, but that'll be more isolated. Other areas won't see anything at all. Southeast winds tomorrow, basically 20 knots east, tending to increase tomorrow night, and 25 to 30 knots here for most of the coast. Looking for gales out of the east there on the north end here, 15 knot seas as well. And for Kodiak Island, gale force winds coming in well, as early as overnight tonight here, 40 knots tomorrow for the eastern zones there, 35 knots for the Shelikof Strait back up into Kamishak Bay and the Barrens and the western Gulf Coast, dropping off significantly up toward Prince William Sound and northern Cook Inlet. But those winds will even come up on Sunday, northeast 20 here north of the Forelands back up toward Turnagain Arm, and northeast 30 knots there for the Mid-Sound area. Definitely small craft advisories with 35 to 40 knot winds along the North Gulf Coast, but dropping back as that front lifts northward, coming down considerably there for the Kodiak Island, both sides of the island actually in Shelikof Strait. Bristol Bay east 25, northeast 35, Sitkinak down in toward Chignik, and then easterly winds here for the Alaska Peninsula at about 20 knots tomorrow. And for the Sunday outlook, could be some small craft advisory southeasterlies there for the peninsula on the Bering Sea side. Otherwise, becoming quite light southwest of Kodiak, excuse me, probably by early in the day on Sunday, east 15 for Bristol Bay. Out in the Aleutians, westerlies 15 to 20 here for the west central area, Shimia southwest 25. Gale force winds, easterlies 25 to 30 knots or 35 knots there for the eastern areas. and then those become southeast, diminish. Small craft advisories, though, still across the Alaska or unalaska area, Dutch Harbor, and lighter winds, though, through the central areas, coming back to 20 knots for the far western zone. Pribilofs tomorrow, east 20, small craft advisories, east 25 to 20 to 25 knots along the southwest coast, and about 20 knots for the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, southeast 15. Then those become easterly, all areas, and about 15 knots here in the north from Kuskokwim Bay out to the Pribilofs, 20 to maybe 25 knots here at times for the Pribilofs. And up along the Arctic coast, light variable winds tomorrow on the east side and kind of light from the southwest here in the west areas. South 20 though for the Cape Lisburne, Point Hope areas. And then for Sunday, they all swing back around, staying quite light here, which means the direction doesn't have all that much meaning to it, but northeasterly starting out at 10. Pick up, it's only 20 knots there out to the west. Easterlies at 20 there for Kotzebue Sound and the southeast Chukchi Sea. For tonight, frontal boundary gusty winds slip on up into Kodiak Island. There's a next system there, a disturbance pulling up along the Alaska Peninsula. Still tomorrow right through here, keeping periods of rain, heaviest over Kodiak Island. With those gale force winds, they'll spread up into Kamishak Bay and eventually on Sunday, the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, no change for the interior, both tomorrow and Saturday, but this system will be coming northward as the upper level high starts to pull off to the southeast and bring a good shot of wind and gale force winds into the North Gulf Coast, and eventually some rain spreading into the coastal areas of the Panhandle. More than likely in the afternoon, less chance in the morning. Again, no change over the interior. Winds light, but pretty gusty over the northern Bering Sea. Well, let's look at the weather. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.